The ring was heavier than she had expected. Marisol Pendleton stood in the dim morning light of the solicitor's office, turning the gold band between her fingers, and thought that a thing so small should not feel like a stone pressed into her palm. The engraving along the inside was fresh. 1 year. Her initials. His. The date of their wedding, which was 2 hours away, and the date of its dissolution, 365 days after that. Across the heavy walnut desk, the Duke of Haverford stood with his gloved hands folded behind his back, watching her examine the ring as a man might watch a creditor count coins. His face gave nothing. It never did. In the 3 meetings they had endured over the last fortnight, she had seen him smile exactly once, the mechanical smile of a man acknowledging a pleasantry he did not feel. "You may read the terms again if you wish," he said. "I have read them 4 times, Your Grace." She laid the ring down on the blotter. "I will marry you today. I will live at Agincourt as your Duchess for 1 calendar year. I will attend every function on your secretary's schedule. I will smile at your mother. I will preside at your table. And on the morning of the 365th day, the marriage will be dissolved by private annulment, the papers for which are already signed by the Archbishop, who owes your family a favor I shall not ask about. Precisely. And in exchange, my brother's debt to the crown is paid in full. My sisters each receive a dowry sufficient to secure respectable matches, and my father's name is removed from the list of gentlemen whose estates are about to be seized." Precisely. She looked up at him then, because she had decided during the carriage ride that she would not be the sort of woman who looked down at her hands while being bought. "Your Grace, forgive me for asking. Why me?" Something flickered at the edge of his jaw, and was gone so quickly she thought she had imagined it. "Because you have a reputation for being sensible, and because your family is desperate enough to hold its tongue for a year. Neither quality is common. Together, they are very nearly unique. So, I am a matter of statistics. You are a matter of convenience." The word landed between them like a coin dropped on stone. She did not flinch. She had made herself promise, in the small hours of the night when the offer had first been laid before her family, that she would not let this man see her flinch. Very well. A matter of convenience. He reached across and picked up the ring. For an instant, she thought he meant to put it on her finger. But he did not. He held it out on his gloved palm, flat, as one might present a key. "You may wear it from the ceremony onward. Not before. I would prefer the servants see it placed on your hand by a clergyman." "Of course you would." "Miss Pendleton, if you continue to address me in that tone for the next 365 days, this year will feel considerably longer than a year. Then I suggest, Your Grace, that you refrain from speaking to me as if I were an expense line in your ledger, and I shall refrain from sounding as though I am about to present you with an invoice." For a single second, she thought she saw the corner of his mouth move. It might have been the light. Agreed. The chapel at Agincourt was colder than a chapel ought to be in late spring. Marisol stood at the threshold, in a gown hastily altered from her mother's wedding dress. The lace yellowed at the cuffs. Her father had pleaded illness rather than give her away. The truth was that he could not bear to watch. It was her elder brother Fenric who waited in the aisle, his good hand folded over his bad one. The bad hand was the reason they were all here. A duel 3 years ago, a wound that had left him unable to manage the estate, a slow ruin that had consumed the family, one creditor at a time, until the Duke of Haverford had appeared with a proposal that no sensible family could refuse, and no proud family could accept, without dying a little. Fenric had cried when she told him. That had been worse than the Duke. "You do not have to do this," he whispered, as he led her down the aisle. "Say the word, and I will take you out through the vestry. There is no other way, Fen. Mari, there is no other way. At the altar, the Duke was already waiting. He wore black, as if this were a funeral, which in a sense it was. Beside him stood his mother, the Dowager Duchess, a small, upright woman with iron-colored hair and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. The chapel held perhaps 20 people. It had been designed to hold 300. The vicar was a nervous man named Ormsby. Marisol barely heard the words. She heard her own voice say the vows when prompted. She heard the Duke's voice say them back, without inflection, as if reading from a list of goods received. She felt the ring slide onto her finger. Cold metal. Tighter than expected. Her hand trembled, and she hated it. So she pressed her thumb against the band until her knuckle turned white. When the vicar pronounced them wed, the Duke did not kiss her. He inclined his head half an inch and turned her toward the small gathering. The Dowager Duchess did not applaud. Marisol met her new mother-in-law's eyes across the aisle and received a look that said quite clearly, "I know exactly what you are, and I shall be counting the days." Good, Marisol thought. So shall I. The wedding breakfast in the long gallery was the most silent meal she had ever endured. 4 courses, 7 guests, conversation attempted twice by her mother, both times allowed to die on the vine. The Duke sat at the head. Marisol sat at his right. They did not speak to each other once. When the guests had made their careful excuses, the Duke rose and turned to her. "Your things have been taken up. My housekeeper, Mrs. Ardwick, will show you to your rooms. You will have the east wing. I reside in the west. We shall meet at dinner each evening at 8. Outside of scheduled engagements, I see no reason for our paths to cross." "None at all." "Good. Your Grace, Miss Pendleton." "I'm afraid I am not Miss Pendleton any longer. You have seen to that yourself." He stopped. For a heartbeat, he looked at her properly, and she saw something move behind his eyes that she could not name and did not trust. "Your Grace, forgive me. The habit will take adjustment. 365 days should be sufficient." He turned to leave, paused at the doorway, and without looking back, he said, "There is one matter I neglected to raise this morning. The terms of the contract are known only to my solicitor, yourself, and me. My mother does not know. My staff does not know. Society does not know. For the year to serve its purpose, no one must suspect that this is anything other than a real marriage. You will be observed closely. My mother, in particular, is a woman of formidable attention. If at any point you give her reason to believe this is a sham, the contract collapses, and with it, every provision I have made for your family." Her breath caught. "You did not raise this detail this morning because you did not wish me to refuse." "I did not raise it because I did not wish to give you the opportunity to bargain." "That is dishonest, Your Grace." "That is practical, Your Grace." Something in the line of his shoulders had gone very tight. "Good evening," he said, and was gone. Marisol stood alone in the long gallery, the gold ring cold on her finger, and she understood for the first time precisely what she had agreed to. Not a year of polite coexistence, a year of performance, a year of convincing a woman with iron eyes that she loved a man who had married her as a matter of statistics. She pressed her thumb against the ring again, hard. 365 days, she whispered to the empty room. Somewhere above her, a clock began to strike the hour, and she counted the chimes until they stopped. Day 1 had begun. The East Wing at Agincourt was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful. Marisol walked through it that first afternoon behind Mrs. Ardwick, the housekeeper. The Flemish tapestries, the long windows overlooking the lake. Nothing in any of the 12 rooms she was shown looked as though a person had sat in it in recent memory. His late Grace closed the East Wing 11 years ago, Mrs. Ardwick said. "It has been kept aired, but not lived in. His Grace instructed us to open it this past week." "And His Grace's mother? Where does she reside?" "In the Dower House, across the park. She comes to Agincourt for dinner 3 nights a week, and for the whole of Sunday." In the bedchamber, on the mantel, a clock ticked, and Marisol noticed at once that it ticked in perfect time with one she could faintly hear from somewhere deeper in the house. "All the clocks at Agincourt are kept to the same minute," Mrs. Ardwick said. "His Grace insists. They are wound every Friday by Mr. Hollish, the under-butler." "Of course they are." Mrs. Ardwick's mouth tightened in a way that might have been the faintest suppressed amusement. "Mrs. Ardwick, how long have you been in service here?" 29 years. I came as a housemaid at 16. "Then you knew the Duke as a boy." A small pause. "I did, Your Grace." "Was he always like this?" A longer pause. Mrs. Ardwick looked at the floor, then at the window, then at Marisol. "No, Your Grace, he was not." And she left the room before Marisol could ask anything else. Dinner that first evening was taken in the smaller dining room. The Duke arrived precisely at 8. Marisol was already seated at the opposite end, 5 yards off, behind a wall of silver candelabra, and an arrangement of hothouse roses, so tall she could barely see him past it. "Good evening, Your Grace." "Good evening." The soup came. They ate in silence. The fish came. She counted bites, stopped, counted roses instead. 23. After the fish, she could bear it no longer. "If we are to convince your mother that this is a real marriage, I feel I should point out that we cannot do so across 5 yards of table and a wall of flowers. The flowers are for your enjoyment. I am not enjoying them." "Noted." Silence returned. The roast arrived. "May I ask a question?" "You may ask. I do not promise to answer." "When your mother is present at dinner, where do I sit?" For the first time, he looked up from his plate, and she saw that he had been waiting for this question, weighing her. "At my right hand, at the near chair." "Then I suggest that until the 3 nights a week when she is present, we also sit at the near chair. It will be easier to sustain the habit than to establish it and lose it and establish it again." He considered her for a long moment. "Agreed." "Thank you." "Do not thank me. It is practical." The next morning, a sheet of paper was delivered to her rooms, written in a strong, precise hand, in ink so black it looked wet. "The Duchess of Haverford. Schedule of engagements. Year 1. 57 dates listed. The tenants' dinner. The harvest ball. 3 court appearances in the spring. A ball at Carlton House. Sundays at the Dower House, every single Sunday. 52 of them underlined in red. At the bottom of the page, a final line. On the morning of the 365th day, a carriage will be prepared to convey you to your family's estate. The contract will be dissolved by noon. The ring is yours to keep or to return, at your preference." She read the last line 3 times. That evening at dinner, she asked him, "You wrote that the ring is mine to keep or to return." "I did." "Why?" He was cutting a pear. He did not look up. "It was made for you. I have no use for it afterward. It bears your family's crest. It cannot be worn by anyone else without scandal." "No." "Then why is it mine to keep?" He set down the knife. He looked at her for a long moment across the candelabra. "Because, Your Grace, when this year is over, I would prefer that you have one thing from it that is yours to do with as you choose. Whether you wear it, or sell it, or throw it in a river, will be entirely your concern. I shall not ask." She did not know what to say to that. He returned to his pear. She lay awake that night for a long time, turning the ring on her finger in the dark. She counted on her fingers the days that remained. 363. The clock on her mantel ticked in perfect agreement with one somewhere deeper in the house, and she thought for a moment that she could hear his clock too, across the whole long width of Ashen Court, ticking in the dark of the West Wing in perfect time with hers. On the 7th day, she met the Dowager Duchess for the first time as a married woman. Sunday dinner at the Dower House was a small affair, which Marisol soon understood to be one of the weapons in her mother-in-law's considerable arsenal. A small affair meant nowhere to hide. Marisol arrived on her husband's arm. The Dowager was already seated when they were announced. She did not rise. "Haverford, Your Grace," she said in identical tones. "Mother, come and sit. I wish to look at you both." Marisol sat on a low chair facing the Dowager's higher one. The Duke took the chair beside her, equal in height to his mother's. "So, you have survived a week." "I have, Your Grace." "And how have you found my son's house?" "Beautiful, and very well run. Tell me, what do you make of the East Wing?" Marisol felt her husband go very still beside her. "I find it a little quiet, Your Grace. It has the feel of a room that has been waiting for someone. I hope I do not disappoint it." Something in the Dowager's eyes sharpened. "That is a pretty answer." "It was not meant to be pretty, only true." Haverford, your wife is not stupid." "I am aware, Mother." "You have a tendency to marry for reasons. Tell me now, before the soup arrives. What is the reason?" Marisol did not dare look at her husband. "The reason, Mother, is that I wished to. You may add it to your accumulated disappointments, which I know by heart. You wish to marry a girl whose family was 3 weeks from the auction block. A girl you met at precisely 2 engagements before the announcement was made. 4, Mother. 4 then." She turned back to Marisol. "My dear, forgive me. I am an unkind old woman, and it is one of the few pleasures left to me. Tell me, did my son court you?" Here it was. Marisol understood that her entire family's future depended on the next sentence out of her mouth. "He did not, Your Grace. He is not a man who courts. He is a man who decides. He decided, and then he came to my father, and then he came to me. I confess I was not flattered. I was affronted. I refused him once." "Did you?" The Dowager's eyes glittered. "I did." "What changed your mind?" She felt the weight of her husband's attention on the side of her face. She did not turn. "He came a second time, and on the second occasion he did not speak to me as a man speaks to a prospect. He spoke to me as a man speaks to an equal. That was an experience I had not often had in London, and I found it, to my own surprise, persuasive." The Dowager regarded her in silence. "Soup," she said to the footman, and the subject was closed. The Duke did not look at her for the rest of the meal, but when the Dowager had risen to go to her drawing room, as Marisol passed him very quietly, he said, "Thank you." She did not trust herself to answer. She sat with the Dowager for an hour. She played a short piece on the spinet, badly, and the Dowager permitted herself the first real smile of the evening. "Well, at least you do not pretend to play well." "No, Your Grace. The only thing worse than a bad musician is a bad musician who believes herself to be a good one." "Precisely so." At 9, the Duke came to collect her. She kissed the Dowager's cheek, and the old woman's hand rested briefly on her arm. "I shall be watching you very carefully," the Dowager murmured. "It has been a long time since anyone in this house has been worth watching. I shall not mistake it." In the carriage back to Ashen Court, the Duke did not speak for a mile. "You refused me the first time." He was looking at the floor. It seemed the sort of detail your mother would believe. A woman who accepted without hesitation would be a woman who had been bought. A woman who refused once would be a woman who had been persuaded. That was quick thinking. I have had a week to prepare." After another silence, without looking up, he said, "The business about being spoken to as an equal. Where did that come from?" "I invented it." "Ah, is that a disappointment?" "No, it is an instruction." She did not ask what he meant, because the carriage was slowing at the gates, and she was not yet certain she wanted to know. She slept that night with the ring still on her finger. When she woke in the gray hour before dawn, she found she had, without meaning to, turned it around, so the engraving was hidden against her palm, as if she had been trying to keep a secret even from herself. The message arrived on the 31st day. Mr. Hollish appeared at the morning room door with a card on a salver. "A caller, Your Grace." She took the card. "Colonel the Honorable Cavan Thirlwell." Beneath the name, in pencil, a line had been added. "An old friend of the family, hoping very much for the honor of a quarter hour." "Is His Grace at home?" "His Grace has ridden out. He is not expected before 3. She thought a moment. "Very well. Show him into the green parlor." She turned the ring on her finger until the engraving faced outward. The man who rose from the settee was younger than she had assumed a colonel would be. Tall, lean, with sand-colored hair, and a narrow, intelligent face that settled into an easy smile the moment he saw her. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion." "Colonel Thirlwell, we are not alone. A maid is sitting in the window." "So she is. You described yourself on your card as an old friend of the family. The name is not familiar to me." "Not an old friend of your family. Of his. I was at school with Haverford. We served together at Badajoz. I have been abroad some 2 years. I returned to London and discovered, to my considerable astonishment, that my friend had married." She had not known her husband had been a soldier. She kept her face still. "My husband did not mention you were expected. He did not know I was coming. Why are you here before my husband has returned?" His eyes changed, not the smile which remained. Something underneath. "You are a very unusual duchess. I have only been at it a month. 31 days, Colonel, which you knew before you came." He laughed softly. "I'm found out. I came early without announcement because I wished to meet you without Haverford present. When I hear that a man like Haverford has contracted a marriage in under a fortnight to a lady he has met 4 times at parties, my curiosity exceeds my manners. You came to inspect me. I came to meet you. That is a gentler word for the same thing." "It is." She regarded him. The maid in the window had not moved, but she could feel the maid listening, and she was grateful for it. "Colonel, I do not know you. You have come to my husband's house in his absence, under a pretext that would not survive 5 minutes of scrutiny. And you have asked me, in every way short of the words themselves, to confide in you about a marriage that is 1 month old. Why on earth would I do that? You would not. I am not such a fool as to have expected it." "Then what did you expect?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I expected that you would be unhappy. And I came, without any right to come, to see whether I could offer you any assistance." The word unhappy landed in the room like a dropped glass. "What in heaven's name has given you that impression?" "Haverford is one of my oldest friends. I love him. I have known him long enough to know what he does when he has decided that a thing is necessary and distasteful. He is correct, he is punctual, he is unfailingly considerate, and he is not there. I have seen him do it to tutors, to officers, to his own mother. I have now, to my sorrow, reason to suppose he is doing it to a wife." Marisol's hands were very still in her lap. "Colonel, you have overstepped. Leave now, please." He rose. "If ever you have need of a friend who owes his first loyalty to your husband and his second to you, and who is old enough and ill-mannered enough to tell you the truth about either. You have only to write. My direction is on the card." He bowed and was gone. She sat for a long time after the door closed. Her husband returned at 3:15 and did not appear until dinner. By then, she had decided 3 things. She would not mention the colonel. She would not give her husband the satisfaction of explaining himself about a friend he had not troubled to name to her in a month. And she would wait to see, with a patience she did not know she possessed, whether the colonel had come of his own initiative or whether he had been sent. At dinner, she smiled across the flowers, and her husband said, "You are very quiet tonight." "I had a headache. It has passed." She slept badly. She twisted the ring back and forth on her finger in the dark, and she thought for the first time that 334 days was a very long time, and that she did not know any longer whether she feared it or counted on it. She said nothing about the colonel for 11 days. It was her husband who mentioned it first. They were at breakfast. Without looking up, he said, "Hollish tells me Cavan Thirlwell called on you 10 days ago." She turned a page. He did. I had not known he was in England. Neither had I, as I had never heard of him. Another long moment. He folded his letter. "Why did you not mention his visit to me?" "Because you did not ask. For 10 days. It was not my question to raise. I do not ordinarily report to you who has called while you were at the South Farms. You do not ordinarily receive strange colonels in my absence either." "Ah. So we have arrived at the true objection. The true objection is that a man called on my wife under a pretext of friendship with me and spent 3/4 of an hour in a parlor with her and left before I returned, and my wife did not think the incident worth mentioning. 3/4 of an hour is a generous estimate. It was closer to 20 minutes. And he did not call on your wife. He called on me. He presented a card. He asked whether I was receiving. A maid sat in the window throughout. What precisely would you have had me do? Refused him. On what grounds? On the grounds that I had not authorized his presence in my house." She felt the blood come up under her skin, and she let it come. "Your Grace, am I required to seek your authorization before I receive visitors in this house?" "That is not what I said. It is the only construction your sentence supports. You told me, on the night of our wedding, that I was to conduct myself as your Duchess in front of your mother, your servants, and the world. You did not at any point tell me that I was required to obtain your permission before I received a caller in a public parlor with a chaperone. If I am required to do so, I should like the requirement put in writing. If I am not required, I should like the question withdrawn." He stared at her. It was the first time in almost 6 weeks that he had looked at her fully, and he looked furious. Not cold. Furious. Not at her. At himself. At, "Your Grace, forgive me. I spoke badly. I withdraw the suggestion." "Thank you. Nevertheless, I should prefer it in future if you would tell me when Cavan Thirlwell visits this house. He is not the disinterested old friend he will have presented himself as. I had already deduced that. He came to inspect me. He wished to know whether I was unhappy. He said he knew you well enough to know you were unfailingly correct and unfailingly absent. I thanked him for his concern. I sent him away. I did not write to him. I have not spoken of him to anyone, including you, because I was waiting to see whether he had come of his own accord or because you sent him." The Duke sat down heavily. He pressed the heel of one hand against his temple. "I did not send him." "I believe you. You would not have been so angry if you had." "No." "Then did he come of his own accord, or was he sent by someone else?" "That is a question I do not yet know the answer to." "Then we shall have to find out. I am not a decoration, Haverford. I was under the impression at the signing, that I had been selected for my sense. If my sense is to be retained, I should like to be informed of what I am being sensible about. He looked at her for a very long time. I believe I owe you an apology for most of the last 6 weeks. He drew a breath. He put both hands flat on the table. Kavan is my oldest friend, but he has a cousin, a man called Gorse, who is my cousin also, distantly, and who stands second in line to my title. If I die without a legitimate heir, Agincourt passes to Gorse. Gorse has debts. Gorse is, to be frank, a man of no character. He has been watching my household since my father's death. He was not pleased to learn of my marriage. Whether Kavan came on his behalf or of his own initiative out of a genuine if misguided concern, I do not yet know. Until I have found out, I would prefer that you did not receive Cavan Thirlwell without my presence in the house. That is a reasonable request, which is very different from the demand you began with. I have noted it. A silence. Your Grace. 31 days. I'm sorry? You waited 31 days for someone to treat you as a sensible person. I am embarrassed that it was not me. She could not answer that. She inclined her head, and she said, I shall be in the morning room. And she went. She sat in her usual chair. She discovered that her hands were shaking, and she did not know whether it was from anger or relief or something else she was not yet willing to name. Something that had to do with the fact that for the first time in 6 weeks, her husband had looked at her and seen her. The ring was on the wrong way round again. She left it there. After that morning, something changed. Not quickly. But he began, in small ways, to be present. He came to the morning room on the 43rd day to ask her opinion on a letter from a tenant. She gave it. He took her advice. He came again on the 45th day, on a matter concerning the hunt, and she gave her opinion, although she had no opinions about hunts and was obliged to invent one. He did not notice. On the 49th day, he asked her to ride. The dowager had told her on the first Sunday about a mare called Periphrasis. He named her himself at 17 and has not had the decency to change it. She is the only living creature at Agincourt who is agreeable. Would you care to ride this morning? Her husband said. I have had Periphrasis brought round. My mother mentioned that she might suit you. Your mother mentioned this when? Some weeks ago. She rode with him for 2 hours through the home woods. He handed her down at the stable yard, and, just as she was turning to go into the house, said, Thank you. I had not ridden with anyone for a considerable time. She climbed the stairs. She had been smiling without knowing it. She examined the smile, as one might examine a bruise, and decided it was not in itself a dangerous thing, and then decided, a moment after that a thing did not have to be dangerous in itself to be dangerous later. She stopped smiling. On the 53rd day it rained with a violence Marisol had not witnessed in years. The roads were impassable by noon. She had nothing to do. She had read all her letters, practiced at the spinet, walked the gallery 8 times, and counted the panes in the east window, which numbered 112. And then she realized she had not, in 53 days, been inside the library at Agincourt. Mrs. Ardwick had told her on her first morning that the library was His Grace's favorite room, that he retired there in the late afternoon, and that he preferred to be undisturbed. The message had been unmistakable. She went to the library. The door was unlatched. She pushed it open. She had expected to find the room empty. She had not expected to find her husband already in it. He was in shirt sleeves. Cuffs turned back once. He was sitting on the floor in front of one of the lower shelves, with books stacked around him, his coat thrown over a chair, his waistcoat unbuttoned at the bottom. His hair, which she had never seen anything but perfectly brushed, had fallen forward, and he had, at some point, pushed it back with an inky hand and left a smudge on his temple. He looked up. For one full second she saw, before his face could organize itself, a man she had never met. A man who was cataloging books on a wet afternoon, alone, who had, until her hand touched that doorknob, been perfectly content. Then the face she knew arrived. "Your Grace, forgive me. I was told the library was not to be disturbed." Mrs. Ardwick is occasionally overzealous in the protection of what she imagines to be my preferences. Please, come in. You are welcome here. You have always been welcome here. I failed to say so, which I now perceive was an oversight. You are cataloging. I am rearranging. My father's system was eccentric. I am imposing one of my own. May I help? He looked up at her. Yes, if you should like to. She sat down on the floor. She did it before she had considered that a duchess does not sit on a library floor in any well-conducted household in the kingdom. She sat because he was sitting. He handed her a book. Travels. Shelf above. Any order you like. I have given up on alphabet. A bold choice. A defeated one. She laughed. It slipped out of her before she had decided whether it was permitted. She looked up, alarmed at herself, and found him looking at her with an expression she had not seen on his face in all the days they had been married. He was smiling. A real one, almost surprised. You smiled. Did I? I thought it only fair to warn you. I shall guard against it in future. Please do not. They catalogued books until the dinner bell rang. He told her that the volume of sermons in the morning room had belonged to his grandmother and was the worst book in the house, and she told him that she had been pretending to read it for 6 weeks, and he laughed quietly, only once. When the dinner bell rang, he stood up and offered her his hand to help her up from the floor. She took it. She had never touched his bare hand before. It was warm, ink-stained. It closed around hers with a steadiness. She felt up her arm and in her shoulder, and somewhere low and unfamiliar in her chest. He held on for 1 heartbeat longer than he ought to have. She did not pull away. He let it go. "Dinner," he said. His voice was slightly rough. When she went up to bed that night, she looked down at her hand. Her palm, where his hand had closed around it, felt warm, as if the warmth had stayed. 312 days remained. She pressed her palm flat against the cold marble of the dressing table to make the warmth go, and it didn't go, and she understood that the trouble had begun. Colonel Thirlwell called again on the 61st day. He came on the open invitation of a letter from the Duke, and he brought his sister, a Mrs. Rowena Carsbrook, a widow of perhaps 40, with a kind, tired face, and her young son, Master Pyrrhon, a boy of 7, who, upon being told that her Grace was the Duchess of Agincourt, asked whether that meant she owned the peacocks. "I do," Marisol told him gravely. "All 4 of them." "Do they bite?" "Only if provoked." "I shall not provoke them," said Master Pyrrhon, and went off to examine the terrace. It was the first laugh Marisol had heard in the house that was not her own. The Duke remained in the drawing room throughout. He sat in the chair beside Marisol's. He poured her tea when her cup was empty without being asked. He addressed Mrs. Carsbrook with the warmth he reserved for people he genuinely liked. "Your Grace," Mrs. Carsbrook said when the men had fallen into a quieter conversation of their own. "May I be impertinent? I believe you have already decided to be. How are you finding Agincourt?" "I am learning to live in the beautiful part." "That is a good answer." "It is a rehearsed one. I have had occasion to use it before, to myself mostly." The widow smiled a slow, crooked smile. "Your Grace, I like you." Cavan described you, after his first call, in terms that suggested he had met a woman who terrified him slightly, and I do not always warm to women who terrify my brother. But you will do. I believe that is the nicest thing anyone has said to me since my wedding. When Marisol glanced up, She found her husband watching her across the room with an expression she could not name. He composed it the instant he saw that she had seen. The party stayed an hour. Colonel Thirlwell bowed over her hand on the front steps. "Forgive me once more for my first visit. I am glad to have been proved wrong about the nature of your marriage." She did not answer. When the carriage had gone and they were alone in the hall, the Duke turned to her. "Thank you. That cannot have been easy. It wasn't difficult. You managed him beautifully. I managed both of you beautifully." He blinked. Then slowly he smiled. "Yes, you did." He offered her his arm. He had never offered it inside his own house before, only in company. This was the first time he had offered it with no one to see. She took it. "I am going to ride out to the north pastures after dinner. I shall be back late. If anyone calls in my absence, no matter who, you will send them away." "What has happened?" "Nothing. You are a poor liar. You ought to practice." "My cousin Gorse is in the county. He arrived yesterday at an inn not 7 miles from here. He has not written. I would prefer that he did not find you." "Then take me with you." "No. Mrs. Ardwick has been told to admit no one. Haverford." She had not, until that moment, used his name. He went very still. A slow flush climbed his throat above his collar. "Yes. Be careful. I shall." He covered her hand with his own. Only for a moment. His fingers closed over hers, and she felt through the fine wool of his coat that his whole arm was tense, as if he were holding himself back from something. 304 days, she said, before she could stop herself. "I know. I was not counting down. I know." He released her hand. He inclined his head. He went. The letter came on the afternoon of the 64th day, sealed with red wax and an unfamiliar crest. It was addressed to Her Grace the Duchess of Haverford, in a hand she did not recognize. The letter was from a Mr. Wetherell Gorse, who presented his humble compliments, who lamented that he had not had the pleasure of being introduced to her at the time of her nuptials, and who felt it incumbent upon him to set before her certain facts that her husband would not have shared. 3 paragraphs. The first informed her that her husband had been betrothed at the time of his accession to a Miss Corisanda Vellicott of Wiltshire, which he had terminated without public explanation within a fortnight of his father's death. Miss Vellicott had never recovered. The second informed her that her husband's income had been, at the time of his accession, in arrears, and that the settlement had coincided with a sudden infusion of capital from an unknown source. The third informed her, with many regrets, that her own family's debts had been satisfied through transactions handled by her husband's solicitor, and that the writer had seen enough documentation to be satisfied that the marriage was, in its financial architecture, a transaction rather than a match. She read the letter 3 times. She folded it. She waited for the trembling to stop. She rang the bell. "Mr. Hollish, I require a closed carriage. Tell the coachman to take me to the Dower House." The dowager received her in the yellow drawing room. "You look as if you have been stung." "I have, or I have been told I have been." "Sit down." Marisol handed the letter across. The dowager read it twice. She folded it and poured out 2 glasses of something that was not tea. "Drink that." "What is it?" "Madeira. Drink it." It hit her empty stomach like a struck match. 3 questions. "Did my son marry you for your money?" "No. My family had none to give him. We had debts. He assumed them." "Did you marry my son for his money?" "No." "Is your marriage what it appears to be?" Marisol thought of her brother, of her sisters, of her husband's face in the library surprised into a smile, of his hand on hers in the corridor. "No, Your Grace, it is not." The dowager sat back. "I knew." "I thought you did." "I have known since the 2nd Sunday. Tell me the terms," Marisol told her. "The contract, the annulment, The ring, the schedule, the dissolution by noon on the 365th day. The dowager listened without interrupting. She refilled both glasses. My son is the most intelligent fool I have ever met. Wetherell Gorse is a distant cousin who has been attempting to insert himself into the succession since he was 20. The letter is half invented. Miss Vellicott is real, but was never betrothed to him. The arrears were real, and were satisfied by 4 years of tedious economy, which I watched him impose upon himself. Your family's debts. That part he has told you the truth about. He has? Good. She laid her hand, dry and cool, on Marisol's wrist. Child, you have been playing a role for my benefit for 64 days so competently that I gave up trying to see through it by the 4th Sunday. My son was not always like this. His father was a cold and difficult man who made him colder in self-defense. By the time he came into the title, he had already trained himself out of the habit of wanting things. And then he married you, because he thought he had found the only woman in England he could marry without wanting, and he was mistaken. Marisol could not speak. Gorse is trying to make you run before the year is out. If you run, the contract collapses, and the thing he has been attempting for 20 years becomes possible. You will not answer this letter. You will show it to my son this evening. You will trust him to deal with Gorse. Yes. 2 more things. If, at the end of your 365th day, you decide you do not wish to remain, you will come to me first. And if you decide you do wish to remain, you will come to me then also. Yes, Your Grace. She showed her husband the letter that evening. He read it in the library, standing. He read it twice. When he had finished, he set it very carefully on the desk and pressed both his hands flat on either side of it and bowed his head. She saw for the first time what her husband looked like when he was truly angry. It was not loud. It was only very still. I shall deal with this. Thank you for bringing it to me. His hand closed around the letter, the way a hand closes around the hilt of a drawn sword. 2 questions before I leave for London in the morning. Did he frighten you? Yes. I'm sorry for that. What is the second question? He looked up. For the first time in 64 days, he did not look away. Are you still here? On the 365th day? Her breath stopped. I do not know. That is an honest answer. It is the only answer I have. He nodded. He folded the letter. He put it in his coat. I shall ask you again when I come back. He was gone 11 days. In his absence, the house felt like a held breath. Mrs. Ardwick watched her with a new and careful kindness. Mr. Hollish admitted no callers. A letter came each second day, ending always with the same line. I shall be home on Tuesday, if matters permit. They permitted. The carriage arrived at 4:30 on a cold, bright Tuesday, and Marisol, who had been in the morning room pretending to read, did not rise to go down, because she did not trust her legs. He came to her. He did not change. He came in his riding coat with the dust of the London road still on him, and he closed the door behind him, which he had never done before, and he stood at the door as if he were unsure of his welcome. It is done. Gorse. He will not trouble you again. How? I would prefer not to tell you in detail. I shall, if you ask. Another time. Not now. He stood at the door. She sat in her chair. Neither moved for what felt like a very long time. Your Grace. Marisol. Haverford. He crossed the room. He knelt in front of her chair. It was not a gesture he had planned. He went down all at once, on both knees, as a man goes down when his legs will not hold him any longer, and he took both her hands in his, and pressed his forehead against her knuckles, and did not speak. She could not breathe. Haverford. Give me a moment. She waited. After a long moment, he lifted his head, and he did not let go of her, and he looked up at her from the floor, and his face was bare, in a way that would have made her look away from any stranger on the street. She did not look away. I came home because I could not bear the 11 days. I could not bear them either. How? Because I imagined you, and imagining you was worse than being alone. Do not ask me to go back to what I was. I could not. Even if the year expires. Even if you leave. Even if you take the ring off and put it in my hand on the 365th day, and walk out, and never come back. I cannot go back to what I was before I knew you were in the house. Haverford, do not promise me anything. I was not going to. Please. Then let me say what I'm going to say, and you may decide afterward whether you heard a promise in it. Yes. She did not move her hands. I did not come to this house wanting you. I came to save my brother and my sisters and my father's name. I did not come to this marriage to fall in love. I did not come with any expectation of kindness, and I received none for the first 6 weeks. And then you thanked me in a carriage, and you asked my advice on a tenant's letter, and you sat on the library floor on a rainy afternoon, and you came in from London covered in dust, and knelt at my chair, and I do not know at what point I stopped counting down and started counting up, but I have. I am telling you that it happened because I owe you honesty. He closed his eyes. I owe you more than honesty. I shall take the honesty first. You are not, I suppose, prepared to let me stay on the floor for a while. I am not. He rose. He did not let go of her hands, which meant she rose with him, and by the time they were both standing, they were closer to one another than they had ever been, and she could see that his eyes were wet, and he could see that hers were as well. I am going to kiss you now, and you are going to tell me not to, and I am going to listen. Or you are going to say nothing, and I am going to proceed. I want you to choose, Marisol. For once in this year, to choose. She said nothing. He kissed her. It was careful. It was startled. His hand came up to her face and rested against her cheek, and did not know what to do with itself. She turned her face into it. She felt him breathe out as if he had been holding that breath for months. She kissed him back. When they stopped, they did not move apart. He rested his forehead against hers. His breathing was uneven. 301 days. I know. I still do not know the answer. I know. Do not ask me tonight. Or tomorrow. I need the rest of the year. You shall have it. They sat on the floor of her morning room and talked until the fire went out. He told her about Miss Vellicott, whom he had not seen in 7 years, and about his father, and about the peninsula, where he had been 19. She told him about her brother's duel, and about the night her father had come into the drawing room with the offer in his hand, and had not been able to look at her. At some point near dawn, she fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. He did not move for an hour. When Mrs. Ardwick opened the morning room door at 6 and stopped short on the threshold, he lifted his free hand from where it rested in Marisol's hair and laid one finger against his lips. Mrs. Ardwick nodded once, very slowly, and closed the door. What followed was the longest quiet season of her life. She measured it afterward, not in weeks, but in mornings. Rides at first light when the dew was still on the grass, afternoons in the library, and dinners at the near end of the table, at which he reached sometimes across the cloth to touch her hand. Sunday dinners at the Dower House, during which the Dowager watched them both with an expression that was no longer appraising, but something closer to grim satisfaction. She kissed him in the orchard on the 112th day, when the apples were in blossom. She woke in his arms on a sofa in the long gallery on the 140th, because they had not been able to make themselves go up to separate rooms. She did not, during that time, look at the calendar, because she had discovered that if she did not look, the numbers did not apply. On the 232nd day, His solicitor came down from London. He was an elderly man named Tregarth, thin and dry and polite, and Marisol had met him only once before, at the signing, and had not thought of him since. She met him again in the hall, as he was leaving. "Mr. Tregarth." "Your Grace." He cleared his throat in the small, apologetic way of a man who had remembered, at the last moment, a thing he had been instructed to do and was not looking forward to. "His Grace has asked me, in the course of our discussions today, to have the annulment papers placed into final form. I am to bring them back on the 362nd day, so that all is in readiness. I wished you to know, so that you need not be troubled with the detail." She smiled at him. She did not know afterward how she smiled. She only knew that she reached her rooms, closed the door, and stood with her back against it, and did not cry, because crying would have been easier. He had instructed his solicitor to have the annulment papers placed into final form for the 365th day. On the 232nd day, she had been on the floor of the library with him. She had been in the corridor. She had been on the morning room floor at dawn, with her head on his shoulder. She had kissed him in the orchard. She had woken in his arms. She had begun, in the private quiet of her own mind, to answer his question. She had not yet told him. And on the 232nd day, he had told his solicitor to finalize the papers that would end the marriage on the 365th. She sat down at her writing desk. She took out paper. She dipped the pen. She did not write. At last she rose. She went to her dressing room. She took off the ring. She laid it on the velvet tray. She looked at her bare hand for a long time. Then she put the ring back on, because she was not the sort of woman who made decisions in 1 hour. She slept badly. She avoided him the next morning. Tregarth was at breakfast. By the time her husband returned from the village, she had gone out herself, and came back only in time to change for dinner. She sat through dinner. She did not look at him fully. "Marisol, have I done something?" "I have a headache. It has not passed." "Your Grace, Haverford. Please. Tomorrow." On the following morning she made herself sit through breakfast, and when he asked whether she would ride, she said yes, because she had to find out. She waited until they were in the home woods, where no one could overhear. "Mr. Tregarth mentioned, quite by accident, that you had asked him yesterday to place the annulment papers into final form, and to bring them down on the 362nd day. He reined in. "Yes, I did ask him that." "On the 232nd day. Was there a reason for the timing?" He did not answer at once. His face had gone careful in the way she had learned to dread. "Yes. I did not want him to draw the papers at the last minute. I asked him to prepare them quietly, so that if they were ever needed, they would exist, and if they were not needed, they could be destroyed without ceremony. You did not ask him to burn them. You did not tell him they would not be needed." "No." "Why, Haverford?" "Because I have not asked you, and I did not want to put you in a position where refusing me would cost you anything other than the refusal. I wanted the papers to exist. I wanted you to be free to choose on the 365th day, without having to fear that if you chose to go, there would be no means of going. I thought I was doing you a kindness. You were preserving my means of leaving you on the 232nd day. Yes. Did it occur to you that a woman who has spent these months being loved quietly by her husband might not wish to discover, from his solicitor, that her husband has spent those same months making certain that she could leave him neatly on an agreed date? No, it did not. I see. Marisol, please. No, not today." She turned the horse. She rode back alone. She went up the back stair. She sat at the dressing table. She took off the ring. She laid it on the velvet tray. This time she did not put it back on. She sat for a long time, and she understood two things. The first was that he had not been dishonest. He had done what a careful man does, which was to preserve her freedom at the expense of his own vulnerability, from the most loving motive he was capable of, and he had failed to understand that the act of preserving her freedom was itself an injury, because it said, more plainly than words, that he had not yet believed she was going to stay. The second was that she had not yet told him she was going to stay. She had been waiting to hear him beg her to, and he had not, because he was the sort of man who could not, because 30 years of being trained not to want had made asking for a thing feel, to him, like an act of violence. 133 days remained. She left the ring where it was. "Have a trunk brought up," she told her maid. "The small one from the dressing attic. I shall be going to my sister's in Kent for a fortnight." She drew a sheet of paper toward her, and she wrote 4 lines. "I have gone to my sister in Kent for a fortnight. I require the time. I am not breaking the contract. I shall return in time to keep it. I ask that you do not come after me." She signed it. M. She laid the note on the mantel where he would find it, and she went to pack. Kent was cold. Her sister Isella had married 3 summers ago to a country squire, and lived in a rectangular stone house on the edge of a village called Murrow, with 2 small dogs and a husband, who asked no questions when his sister-in-law arrived unannounced, with 1 trunk and a face that told its own story. Isella opened the door herself, said, "Oh, Mari," and held out her arms. She did not tell her for 3 days. On the 4th morning, Isella set down her cup and said, "All right, now." Marisol told her everything. When she finished, Isella said, "You did the right thing. The leaving for a fortnight part. The rest I reserve judgment on. You are angry because he did not believe you were going to stay. Are you sure, Mari, that you had given him reason to believe it, in words?" Marisol was silent. "Ah, he did not ask me in words. Men who have been trained out of asking do not begin simply because we have begun answering. When you go back, you will need to tell him. Not hint. Tell. In words, he can write down." "I know." She took the fortnight. She walked in Kentish rain. She wrote a long letter to the Dowager, and the reply came by express 4 days later. "You have done right. Come home when you are ready. He is quieter than usual, and more useful than usual, which is my own private measure. Signed, Haverford. The first Haverford." Marisol understood at last that her mother-in-law had been the Dowager Duchess for so long that she had almost forgotten her own given name, and that by signing Haverford, she was telling Marisol, in the only vocabulary she possessed, that she was the Duchess's mother now, and no longer anyone else's. On the 8th day, a letter arrived from her husband, enclosed inside a letter from Mr. Hollish, who apologized for presuming to forward correspondence that had not been requested, and explained that the letter had been left on his Grace's writing desk, sealed for more than a day, his Grace having neither sent it nor destroyed it, and that Mr. Hollish had taken the liberty of posting it. She laughed once, a little wetly. Then she opened her husband's letter. "Marisol, you asked that I not come after you. I shall not come. This letter I have drafted and redrafted, and on the 3rd attempt I have stopped trying to make it say what it ought to say. You were right. I did not believe you would stay. I did not ask whether you would stay. I did not ask because asking would have required me to say that I wanted you to, and wanting in that direction, aloud, is a thing I have not done since I was very young. I told Tregarth to prepare the papers because I could not imagine an arrangement in which you would not need them. I could imagine a woman who loved me. I could not place that woman in the same room as myself. That is the defect. I shall not use these pages to ask you to come back. I did not earn the right to ask. I shall tell you what I shall do while you are gone. I shall write to Tregarth and instruct him that the papers are to be withdrawn and burned in my presence. I shall not open the east wing to any other occupant. I shall not sit at the head of the table. I shall take my dinners in the library. The long gallery shall be closed, because I cannot walk through it at present without rehearsing certain mornings that I have no right to rehearse alone. On the 365th day, if you do not return, I shall send the carriage as agreed. I shall not come to it. I shall be at the dower house, so that I shall not be present when your boxes are carried out, which I could not bear. On the 365th day, if you do return, I shall be on the South Drive at noon, alone, without witness, and I shall ask you a question in the open air that I ought to have asked you on a library floor some time ago. I do not expect an answer to this letter. I shall wait. I am learning, finally, how to wait. Haverford. Beneath the signature, very small, added with a different pen. It is quieter here than you would suppose possible. The clocks keep time, but nothing else does. She read the letter 4 times. On the 5th, she laid it flat on the table and put her hand over it, and closed her eyes, and sat like that, until Isella came in, and did not ask. Isella, I am going to stay. I know. I mean for another week, here. But I am going to stay. With him. Afterward. I've known since you walked in. She wrote to him on the 10th day. Haverford, I have received your letter. Do not burn the papers yet. Leave them with Tregarth. Not because I shall need them, because I wish to burn them myself in your presence when I come home. Your letter arrived at a useful hour. I am keeping it, Marisol. She came home on the 258th day. She took the last stage and hired a chaise and paid the driver extra to say nothing at the gate. She came in at the south gate, walked up on foot. The house was quieter than she remembered. She reached the south terrace, tried the garden door, which was unlocked, and went in. He was in the library, at the long table by the window, back half to the door, a ledger open, a pen in his hand, in shirt sleeves. His hair had fallen forward. She stood in the doorway. And then, without turning, he said, very quietly, Marisol, how did you know? I've been listening for the door for 10 days. She came into the library. He set down the pen. He did not turn round. What? She understood that he did not trust himself to. Mr. Hollish forwarded your first letter. I should have been angry with him. I was not. He took a great risk. I am grateful to him. So am I, Haverford. Turn round. He turned round. He had lost weight. Not much. But she saw it at once. You are home. For the moment. I have not decided, Haverford. I have decided some things. I have not decided the one thing. I know. She crossed the library and stopped at the window beside him. I read your letter 7 times. Only 7. 11, if we are to be honest. I was counting as well. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. If you answer well, I shall stay tonight. If you answer badly, I shall go to my rooms, and we shall have dinner, as we did on the first night, with the candelabra between us, and we shall try again tomorrow. I agree. First, if I had not come home today, if I had stayed in Kent until the 365th day, what would you have done on the 366th day? He did not answer at once. I'm trying to be honest. I would have stayed in bed until past noon. My mother would have come up, without being asked, and sat beside the bed and read to me from a book chosen to be boring, which she has done once before in my life. On the 367th day, I would have opened the east wing and walked through it once and closed it again. And I would have written to you, to say that the papers had been burnt, that the provisions for your family stood in perpetuity, and that if at any point you wished to return, the south door would be unlocked. Second, if I stay tonight, if I stay for the remaining 107 days, and on that morning I take off this ring and put it in your hand, what will you do? Marisol. Answer me." He closed his eyes. "I shall take it. I shall close the ring in my hand, and walk with you to the carriage, and hand you in myself. I shall not weep in front of you. I shall not ask you to stay. I shall thank you for the year. And then I shall be a worse man than I was when you came, because I shall have known what it was to have you and to lose you by my own doing. But I shall not call that a debt against you. I shall carry it. Third, why did you not come to Kent? You asked me not to. That is part of why. The other part is that I knew if I came to Kent and asked you to come home, you would come, because you are the kind of woman who would. And I didn't want you to come home because I had asked. I wanted you to come home because you had chosen. So I stayed. I wrote one letter. I waited. Haverford, you have answered well. Shall you stay tonight? I shall stay tonight. I have not said I shall stay after tonight. I know. She turned toward him. She took one step closer. She reached up slowly, and with her fingers, she smoothed his hair back from his forehead, as she had wanted to do for the whole journey home. His eyes closed. He did not take her hand. He did not presume. I do not yet know, Haverford, but I am going to stay to find out. That is the decision I have made. I understand. Marisol, thank you for coming home. Do not thank me. It is practical. And for the first time since she had walked into the library, he laughed. A small, startled laugh, not quite steady, and she laughed with him, because the laugh was the first promise either of them had made, and it was a promise they could both keep. The remaining 107 days were not easy. They were not either what she had feared. Instead, they worked. He brought her the estate ledgers in the evenings, not as a gesture, as a request. He asked her opinion on the tenants. He listened to her answers. He disagreed with her 3 times in the first week and deferred twice. And on the third occasion, when he did not defer, he explained in exact detail why he did not. And she understood, when he had finished, that she had been wrong and that she would not have been told so by any other man of her acquaintance. She thanked him. He looked at her as if she had handed him something, and he did not quite know where to put it. They did not speak of the 365th day. They spoke of Fenric, whose hand was doing a little more than a year before, because a surgeon in London had been paid to examine it at her husband's quiet expense, which she learned by accident. They went to dine with his mother on the first Sunday after her return, and the dowager looked at Marisol once across the table and then did not look at her again. And Marisol understood that the not looking was in the dowager's peculiar vocabulary, a kind of embrace. They did not resume the mornings on the morning room floor. They sat together every evening in the library, one at each end of the long table, and they read, and they spoke across the length of it, as if rebuilding a language they had used to speak fluently and had forgotten. He did not touch her. He did not try. She understood that he was waiting for her, and that he would wait for the remaining days if he had to, and that he would not be the one to move first. She let him wait, not out of cruelty, out of care. On the 329th day, a note came from the solicitor. The papers remained in the safe in final form, and he would bring them down on the 362nd day, unless otherwise directed. Her husband brought the note to her at breakfast. He set it beside her plate. He did not speak. She read it. She folded it. He is to bring them down. Yes. Thank you. They did not speak of it again. On the 341st day, Colonel Thirlwell came to dine with his sister. They stayed 3 nights. Mrs. Carsbrook embraced her on the front steps. You are happy here. I think I am. Don't think. Decide. Some things cannot be deferred past a certain day. I know. On the 354th day, the dowager fell ill. A chill, a cough, a fever of 2 nights. The physician said there was nothing to fear but age and drafts and Madeira, two of which the dowager was unwilling to renounce. Marisol sat up with her in the yellow drawing room, while her husband slept in a chair in the corner. Near 3 a.m, the dowager opened her eyes. "Child, what day is it?" "The 355th. 10 days. Have you told him?" "Not yet." The old woman smiled. "Be kind. He has been managing. Do not make him wait until the day." "I shall not." She told him on the 357th day. It was a Tuesday. They were in the library after dinner. She said, without preamble, without sitting up, "Haverford." "Yes, I am going to stay." He did not move. For a long moment he did not breathe. She could hear, in the new silence, the 2 clocks in the library ticking in their perfect agreement. "Marisol, do not speak yet. I am going to stay, but I shall not stay on these terms. I shall not stay as the Duchess of a contract. I shall not stay as the woman who came to this house in a gown altered from her mother's dress. I shall not stay as the woman who was told, on her wedding night, what the terms of her presence would be. That woman has done her year. She has earned her freedom. Yes. If I am to stay, I shall stay as a woman who has been asked, not by a contract, not by a solicitor, by a man, in the open air. On the 365th day, at noon, on the South Drive, without witnesses, you will ask me the question you said in your letter you would ask. I shall be ready to answer it. If you ask it, I shall stay. If you do not ask it, I shall go, and I shall not hold it against you. Do you agree?" "I agree. I have not told you that I love you, Haverford. I shall not tell you tonight. I shall tell you on the 365th day, after you have asked, not before. I know your reasons. Good. Go on with your ledger. I cannot. I cannot go to bed either. Come and sit by the fire. We shall sit, and we shall not speak, and we shall watch the fire until one of us is able to move." He crossed the library and sat down beside her, not touching. She laid her hand on the cushion between them. After a moment, slowly, as if asking permission, he laid his hand over hers. Their palms met, his fingers closed. They sat like that, watching the fire for a very long time. On the 362nd day, when Mr. Tregarth came down from London with the annulment papers in a leather folder, Marisol met him in the library. Her husband was present. So was the dowager, who had risen from her sickbed for the occasion and been installed in her favorite chair with a rug over her knees and a glass of Madeira in her left hand. "Mr. Tregarth, please lay the papers on the desk." He laid them. "Thank you. You may now go and take some refreshment with Mr. Hollish." "Your Grace, the signing is a matter I am required to witness." "There will be no signing, Mr. Tregarth." A pause. The solicitor looked between his client's mother, and his client's wife. "Ah, I see." The solicitor bowed, with a trace of a smile he did not quite suppress, and withdrew. When he was gone, Marisol picked up the folder. She walked to the fireplace. She opened the folder, took out the papers, and laid them on the fire. They caught at once. Her husband stepped forward and, with the iron, pushed them deeper into the flame. They stood together, the three of them, and watched the papers burn. "Good," said the dowager, when the last corner had gone. "Now, I shall have my nap." The 365th day began in a morning mist that burnt off by 11. Marisol rose early. She did not ring for her maid. She dressed herself slowly in a soft gray gown she had made in the village 3 weeks earlier, without telling anyone, because she had decided that whatever else might be true of this day, she would not meet it in any garment that had ever belonged to the woman she had been before. She took the ring off. She laid it on the velvet tray, She looked at her bare hand for a long moment. Then she went down. She breakfasted alone in the morning room. Her husband did not appear. She knew that he was in the library because she had heard him pass her door an hour before, and she knew, because she knew him now, that he was pacing. At 11, she went to the dower house. The dowager rose when she came in. "Child, is it to be today?" "It is." "Then I shall stay here until he rings. He is to ring the great bell at the stable yard." "He is." "I shall listen for it." "Your Grace, if it is not to be, if I find that I cannot. Then you shall come here, on your own feet, and we shall have our talk. You promised me." "I shall come." The dowager kissed her cheek once, dryly. "Child, if it is today, I am glad. If it is not, I shall survive it, as I have survived worse. But I shall tell you, for the record, that I have not been this glad of anything in 15 years. Thank you. Go." Marisol went. She walked back through the park alone. She stopped at the gate and looked back once. The dowager was at the window and lifted her hand. Marisol lifted hers and turned and went on. At 1:15 she put on her cloak and went out of the south door, and she walked down the south drive. He was already there. He was standing alone at the turning before the lodge, where the old lime trees arched over the gravel. In his riding coat. Bareheaded. No gloves. He was pale. She came up to him and stopped at the distance they had used, that first week, at dinner, before she had insisted on the near chair. "Your Grace. Your Grace. Marisol. Haverford. It is noon. It is noon." A long silence. The lime leaves stirred. "I have the carriage prepared if you wish it. It is at the stable yard. I have told the coachman to bring it round on the sound of the bell. He has been instructed that the bell may not ring, in which case he is to stand down. The carriage is a thing that will happen or will not happen. It is not waiting for you. It is waiting for me." "I understand." Marisol. "Yes." She reached into her cloak pocket. She took out the ring. She held it out to him on her open palm. His face did not move. He did not look at the ring. He looked at her. "I am placing it in your hand, Haverford, because you told me on the day you gave it to me that it was mine to keep or to return. I am returning it because I don't wish to wear it any longer as the ring of a contract. That contract ends today. I have placed it in your hand so that you may give it back to me, if you wish, on your own terms, as a new ring, which I shall accept or refuse on my own." He closed his hand around it, very slowly. His fingers were trembling. So were hers. Marisol Pendleton. "Yes. I have rehearsed this speech for 107 days, and I find I have forgotten it. Say the question. Marry me. That is not a question. It is as close as I can get. Say it as a question, Haverford. It matters that you ask, not that you tell." He drew a breath. "Marisol. Will you marry me? Not by the contract, not by the settlement, not by the schedule, or the solicitor, or the archbishop who owed my family a favor. Will you marry me because I am asking you? Yes. Yes, Haverford. Yes." He opened his hand. He took her hand. He slid the ring back onto her finger. She turned it herself, deliberately, so that the engraving faced outward, as she had turned it inward 100 times in the year behind them. "Ring the bell." "Not yet. One moment first. I have earned one moment." He drew her to him, slowly, and he kissed her, there on the south drive in the bright noon, without any witness but the limes. It was the kiss of a man who had finished waiting. She kissed him back. "Now ring the bell." He laughed, a real laugh. He took her hand, and they walked up the drive together, and at the edge of the stable yard, he turned aside and pulled the bell rope himself. The great bell that had not rung at Agincourt for any private reason in 40 years rang out across the park. One long, clear note that reached, she knew, all the way to the dower house, where a small woman in a yellow drawing room would be setting down her Madeira with a hand that trembled, which she would not afterward admit to. Epilogue. 2 years later, on a morning of pale sunlight, Marisol sat in the morning room at Agincourt, with a letter on her knee and a cup of tea that had gone cold without her noticing. The clocks kept their agreement. The rooms were louder than they had been 2 years before, because a small boy of 4 months, called Nevin after her husband's grandfather, had arrived in the spring and had no patience with the clocks of Agincourt or any other, and insisted on keeping his own time. The letter was from Fenric. His hand, since the London surgeon, wrote legibly again. It announced that he was to be married in the autumn, to a girl from a neighboring estate whom he had known all his life and had finally, at 33, had the wit to see. She heard him in the hall. He came in. He was in shirt sleeves. It was his library habit now. He had ink on his fingers. He had, she saw, a smudge on his temple. Ink. I know. I felt it go on. I did not stop. Come here. He came. She rubbed the smudge away with her thumb. A letter from Fenric. He is to be married in the autumn. He sat down beside her. He watched her in the particular way he watched her, which she had had 2 years to grow used to, and had not yet grown used to. What? I was thinking about the ring. I would like, one day, to have the engraving changed. The dates. I do not want those dates on the ring any longer. I was thinking of a different inscription. What inscription? Yours. To do with as you choose, as I said at dinner on the first night. Haverford, I am smiling because I am pleased. Let me see your hand. He gave her his hand. She pressed her lips to the clean knuckle. No. Leave the dates. The first is the day I came into this house with my mother's dress pinned at the cuffs and stood at an altar with a man I did not know. The second is the day I walked down the South Drive at noon and asked you to ask me a question. I shall not have either removed. They are the dates that made us. Marisol. You may change many things, Haverford. You may open the long gallery. You may ring the stable bell whenever you wish. But you shall not erase the calendar of this house. The days were what they were. I do not regret one of them. Not one. Not even the 107. Especially not the 107. I needed them. So did you. He rose to ring for fresh tea. He stopped at the door and turned back, and he said, as if he could not stop himself, I love you. I know. Say it back. At dinner. Marisol. At dinner, Haverford. You may have one at breakfast and one at dinner. That is the rule. That is a tyrannical rule. It is a rule I invented on the 365th day. You agreed to it. You were not listening. You were ringing a bell. He laughed. He rang for tea. He came back. He bent his head and kissed her hair, and she closed her eyes. And upstairs, a child of 4 months, who kept his own time, began a quiet, considering noise that was not yet a cry. And she thought, as she had thought, on perhaps 50 ordinary mornings since the bell had rung, that some rings are placed in the palm and returned, and some rings are accepted twice, and the second acceptance is the one that counts. Thank you for staying with Marisol and Haverford to the end of their story. They began on a day that neither of them chose, with a contract on a desk and a gold ring between them, and for 364 days they counted down. On the 365th day, she placed the ring in his hand, and he placed it back on her finger, and the year they had feared turned into the year they would measure every other year against. If a story of a woman who learned to ask and a man who learned to answer has sat well with you this evening, you will know what to do. Subscribe, so the next one finds you. The next one is already waiting. Thank you, as always, for being the reason these stories exist.